afternoon. Welcome. My name is Jeff Andrews with Business of Childcare. As the audience comes into our session today, so excited to have everybody here on a continuation of our Business of Childcare 2025 Summer Series. We've got a great topic. We've got a great panel today joining us. We'll introduce them here in just a second. And as we get started with our topic, I wanted to also do a quick introduction. My name's Jeff Andrews, President of Business of Childcare, and really fortunate to lead a team of individuals, both here in Minnesota and around the country, are working on behalf of communities and providers. And our mission, really simple, to help guide childcare business owners and the communities they serve to better outcomes. And we're really proud of the impacts, right? At the end of the day, outcomes are a big driver for us. And when we think about the foundation of a lot of our work, not necessarily assume that children and family are better, but expected. When we think about the opportunity, when we have good child care, we have opportunity to unlock wages, and not just for individuals who might have an opportunity at a job, but for providers, the very professionals that are doing the work. And we know when all of those conditions come into place in communities large and small, we realize workforce empowerment, economic growth, and community vitality are a core deliverable. And we can only do it, and you'll hear this a little bit today on this great topic, when we have the whole community in on the outcome, right? And our whole community approach, we center the child care community, at least for this exercise, and help uncover why everybody in the community benefits, often for different reasons, often said little different ways. But at the end, we know that when we have good systems in place, good infrastructure, good providers, we have better families, better outcomes for our community. And that's what ultimately this is all about. Our stages of readiness, that we help connect and meet with communities on, really pretty simple, right? Communities still in that place of understanding what their impact is, maybe even what the opportunity could be. For those who have uncovered an opportunity, we help communities develop actionable plans, right? Plans that are focused on desired outcomes, not set at fixing and solving the entire problem, but really in the moment with what's in and available in that community. What can that community do to begin building momentum? And often when we get to that finish line of having a plan, we realize sometimes our confidence is not as high as we'd like it to be to start activating that. And that's where we do a lot of our work, helping communities take plans and putting them into action, not in years, but in months, because unfortunately, as we all know, we don't have a lot of time to wait. Our success story from 2024, really excited, 2-year span in all of those stages of readiness, working with the Sullivan Chamber and Economic Development, Moultrie County, and others to really put out some great outcomes. New slots desperately needed in that area opening this fall, but at the same time helping support existing providers, helping create incentives that help lead to those outcomes that we're looking at. So as we think about outcomes, we think about where it is that we possibly might have the opportunity to go with what we have in front of us. I like to frame this as not a family issue, right? We no longer can assume that the family will be able to take this on. And we assume and think about other ways in which we create infrastructure within our communities. What does that look like, right? And in real truth, real honest assessment, we know what infrastructure sounds like to us today, right? If we're building a new housing development, we know we're going to need some roads. And with that housing development, we're going to need some utility and extensions, right? How do you get the power and the water and the sewer to those new homes? Might even need a water tower. Just talking to a chamber leader down in North Texas, 400 to 600 new homes coming online. And so water is going to be something certainly they need. And as every community knows, in the world that we're living, technology-based, that broadband fiber, the connections to the rest of the world, all parts and things that we think about as community leaders when we think about when we think about our community. And more we're finding communities are having that conversation and really extending it to thinking about childcare. And when we think about that, we start to think about what sometimes are the challenges that limit our opportunities to create those child care initiatives in a successful manner. And so when we think about the challenges, often the ones that we hear, I know our panelists here in just a moment here, is that limited insight into vacancies, right? What's the real-time availability? What's the real-time gap? What's the real-time anything? We hear that often with a lot of our work as it relates to that. And then we think about where would anybody write a check to? Where would those dollars flow through? Even if we've got the greatest initiative, we got to figure out how the funds are going to move in and out. We know families moving to town, families who are expecting the first call often before anybody else is to local child care providers, right? And so where do they start? I've heard all the stories, 50 calls later, in tears, giving up because frankly, no one either picked up the phone or anybody who did said, hey, in 2 years, we'll be ready to go. And when we think about all of it, we think about the tools that support those processes, right? Support those things that make this all come true. And that's where our invited panelists today really come into the equation, and why I thought it was such an important opportunity and topic to include in our summer series is how do we get that infrastructure in place, right? What does it start to look like? And I've worked with many communities, our team has worked with many communities who are trying to do it themselves, trying to create a website for providers that unfortunately doesn't end up being very effective because there's not a streamlined way for that provider maybe to be updating their real-time outcomes. A community who's got great ideas and initiatives, but limited on how to manage all the funding and dollars coming in and out from all of the willing participants from that whole community. And when we think about today, we think about really a partner to help us explore this, right? And TOOTRiS, an emerging partner for workforce leaders and communities, they bring together and bring to workforce leaders, employers, others, really that ready-made system that starts to solve, if not at least support, our movement forward on a lot of those challenges. And so before we go further, before we jump into the main event, I want to take a moment and introduce our panelists. We'll kick off with Tony Dillon from TOOTRiS. Give a hello and give us a quick welcome.
Hello, everyone. And Jeff, thank you for having this and thank you for everything you do. We're really excited about being a part of this discussion. I think I come, just by the way, from the corporate side. I worked for Toyota for 25 years. So I understand on the manufacturing side, but also the business side of the challenge here, also the responsibility. So I guess, opening statement would be that businesses are problem solvers. So it's not the full solution, but businesses must be part of the solution, finding ways to help with this complicated, complex problem.
Wonderful. Glad you're here. Matthew.
Yes, thank you, Jeff, and ditto to what Tony said. So incredibly wonderful to see your passion and the things that you're doing in just some incredible, unique ways. And appreciate you inviting us to be part of this and looking forward to learning more from you and everyone on this call. So thank you for this.
And Jacob.
Hi, Jeff. Thanks for putting this together. Myself and our team appreciates your community involvement and getting all the forward-thinking leaders organized on this call so we can discuss childcare solutions. For people that don't know me, my name is Jacob Palmy, and I work on the partnership and customer success team here at TOOTRiS. And what I ultimately do is help economic development organizations, employers, and unions learn more about TOOTRiS and how our platform can help make childcare more affordable and accessible throughout America.
And really a great team. If you haven't had a chance to check them out, check out their website. Well, certainly as a follow-up to our summer series today, in the next day or so, send the follow-up some resources, some information, as well as to the recorded session that we'll have on our YouTube channel. And it's really important, and I appreciate the introduction, but I think it goes even deeper, the work that TOOTRiS is doing. Right. And when we think about what that starts to look like, as we've worked with communities after community, especially in the last handful of years, this is a really big part of it. It's often overlooked. And at the end of today, you'll have a chance to hear some stories. We're going to talk about some real life deployments and examples the team at TOOTRiS has deployed. But at the end of it, at the end of the day, and our takeaways, what we're really thinking about is we need to be equipped with the mechanisms, the tools, and the understanding that allow us to, once we even have an initiative up and running, not only support and sustain it from a pure dollars and cents perspective, but to have visibility of it. To have even an extension of maybe this platform or others to say, how do we broaden this message to the community? How do we lift up the fact that childcare as a whole community is a really important, not only maybe challenge in the moment, but an opportunity for the future. And so when we think about this, we think about it should be. We should have a local fiscal agent. We should have insight. We should have better connection between providers and families and even those who want to benefact or be supporters of those efforts. And then obviously the tools in which to help deploy that. So as we think about that and we start to think about stories that we could tell, we think about some of the work, like I said, that TOOTRiS is already doing. And when I think about what that means, I want you to think about yourself in the audience, and I'm going to ask the panel before we get started, what is your biggest barrier, right, to putting real life solutions in place? What is the single one thing, if you could see it in the moment, and there's many along a list, I'm sure, what do you think it is? Matthew, I'm going to pick on you first. If you were to put it in as few words, a phrase, what do you think the single biggest barrier you're seeing in the work that you're leading on behalf of TOOTRiS?
Yeah, that's a great question, Jeff. I think I don't want to be repetitive, but my passion in this childcare space has been what you already mentioned, and that's having an infrastructure and specifically the pipelines of infrastructure, which would include data and the technology to run that infrastructure, and not just a single technology, but something that I've advocated for a long time, and that's a word I like to use, interoperability between all the platforms that create an infrastructure.
Yeah, that's a great highlight. Often one of the biggest questions that limits forward progress for groups that we begin working with is the desire to have all the information in the data. How many real capacity slots do we need? What's the real engagement today? Where are our gaps in even our existing offering? And we try to do that in surveys. We try to do that in sometimes unscientific ways that can really lead us the wrong path. And what I'm hearing you say is that data and understanding, both at the beginning and ongoing, is really critical. Tony, how about you?
Yeah, I'll take a different angle because there's so many different angles to this, and that's the business community again. And that is, I think the key word is perception. The perception is that maybe this is for someone else to help solve. We have a portfolio as a business of many benefits, and we don't really see childcare as the necessity, or maybe we think that that we don't have a problem. But the question is, have you really asked? Do you really know the pain points of the employees and some of the fears, frustrations, and problems that they're having in being at work, doing good work without their mind being on other things? And we have solved a lot of that, or at least assisted in that with other benefit programs. We should be thinking the same way about childcare. How can we offer those kind of benefits to where people are doing their best work every day because they know their children are safe, they know they have quality care, and they can just be for that time stress free for that.
Makes a big difference, right?
Yep,
We hear that from workforce leaders on a regular basis. We talk about interruption, but to your point, we're talking about even just productivity and our sense of being there because we know little Johnny or Susie or whoever is in a place that's
exactly.
safe and appropriate. Jacob, how about you?
I think one of the largest barriers that I see is just lack of information on how to solve the problem. A lot of the employers and groups that we work with that set out and try to identify the childcare issue within their community don't know about solutions like TOOTRiS or the business of childcare, where they can go in and get that kind of support, detailed solution, and a real action plan to go ahead and strengthen the childcare community.
I think that's great, and I think you highlight too something that is critically important is to understand that desired outcome. Right, TOOTRiS and all of its work, I would suggest the same for business of childcare, comes from a real understanding of the real problems that are breaking down our process to the path that we want. And so as you look at all of these examples today, you may reflect and see some that might be right for you. At the same time, making sure that the real outcome you're after is represented is a critical part. So as we think about and start to tell some stories, and we move beyond even the single biggest barrier, we might think about we're going to have TOOTRiS tell us some stories here about examples where communities, employers, and others have really come together to make a difference, to make an outcome. And I'll let them tell those stories in just a second. But really also at the spectrum that I know our audience represents, right? Larger workforce solutions to smaller rural activation opportunities, right? Any realm is possible. And the key, again, back to that idea of a system is an important one. I don't remember which one of you is, and maybe all of you are going to team up and talk about Mazda here in just a second. But as we think about kind of the beginning place, we think about where commitment and funding is there. We know that there can be breakdowns in that deployment, in that delivery. And this is an example of, I think, a major investment made on site to put it together, right? They had all the resources, they had all the pieces, but really lacked that absence of coordinated systems. Even early on, they could see it ahead. Somebody from the TOOTRiS team, not to be super specific, walk us through that story and tell us a little bit about the experience. Tell us a little bit about maybe what happened, and ultimately when we think about why it matters, maybe to the audience listening along.
Yeah, I'll take that one from the Mazda Toyota perspective. It was an interesting dynamic with a little bit of a gap of 20 years. You would never imagine that. But in 2001, one of my first projects at Toyota was to implement a on-site child care center at a Toyota Indiana plant. And that's a big workforce. Back then it was about 5,000. Now it's about 8,000 people. So it was just a big company, but it was a great project, a fun project. And I learned a lot. One of the things I learned, though, is that it's very expensive to put an on-site on board. Fortunately, not always employers have the funds or the ability to do that. They have the resources to do that. In that case, they did. And I don't have anything negative to say in terms of everything matters in this complicated problem. And that it was a great on-site, 16,000 square feet, 150 kids per shift, first and second shift. One of the challenges with that type of an infrastructure was that there's a couple of challenges. One was the cost, because it was not only $4.5 million to build. In today's dollars, it'd be about $15 to $20 million. And then you're paying multiple millions of dollars a year to maintain it. And also, a lot of what we find is a lot of parents would rather have their children watched closer to their home than they would their work. It doesn't mean that's not a good solution. It just means that that's a favorable condition for the parents. And that's why on night shift, trying to solve the night shift problem, they saw an 80% capacity for, even though there was a waiting list for first shifts. Fast forward 20 years, 2019, this giant company in Huntsville, Alabama called Mazda Toyota starting up Greenfield, 4,000 people to hire, and COVID and 2% unemployment, all the crazy conditions, but knew early on that to be an employer of choice, that childcare was important. Fortunately, that wasn't such an obstacle. Getting it approved was still challenging. But what to do was the typical business matrix of all the solutions and measuring that, including on-site, which is kind of where my head was at the time. But after looking at that, and collaboration, which I love, with communities, specifically in this case, Chamber of Commerce, brings this idea forward of this young company called TOOTRiS as a different way to think about childcare. And so after a lot of study, not even believing maybe that it was possible at first, but really peeling back the onion, decided, wait a minute, this is something special. And to make a long story short, HR can get their arms around childcare solutions maybe a little easier, even though they're underfunded, understaffed, usually organizations, and it's hard, but they can get their mind around it. But then it gets to the financial side, and the CFO or the treasurer, in this case, a very strong Japanese treasurer from Toyota Japan, that you have a barrier. How do you get across that barrier of overcoming? And what I knew was going to be successful was at the point where the treasurer said, Tony, what you're telling me is that this isn't just a solution for Mazda Toyota. This is how we are also giving back to the community because TOOTRiS helps uplift the provider network. And he said, I like that a lot. Let's take this to the president. And once I had him, I knew. So I guess the long story short was if I had for any of those companies thinking, how would they justify or get this? Well, two things. One, there's a clear dollars and cents ROI. It's clear, and we have proven that now. And I love the fact that we can put dollars to that. And from a business perspective, that matters. And the second thing is bring in someone outside of HR to be your internal champion. Bring in an operations vice president and say, hey, can I get your head around this to take this forward with me? And that outside influence sometimes can have a huge impact. So that would be my little telling the secrets without really them being secrets. But that whole story of evolution, again, on site still at Toyota Indiana, doing very well. But this is a 75-mile radius that is being hired from. And as other businesses come on board with a TOOTRiS, they have access to this provider network just the same. Now we're talking about maybe that these providers offer additional seats. One of the team members at Mazda Toyota left the company to start their own childcare service using the TOOTRiS platform. Now we're talking about an ecosystem uplift, and I love that.
No, it's a great example, and I think as we think about that, why it matters, that last bullet on this slide, right? That community level systems along with the workforce participation, along with the school and superintendents, along with everybody. And I think that's a real takeaway here is that even as an onsite, you can do it all, but you've got to have the connection and the partnership. And not only do you need to, you should, because it ultimately gives us a better path forward.
Certainly.
And that
Yep.
example shows too, I think, how well, even well-funded projects, right, can run into some of those challenges in larger projects. If we start to shift that story a little bit, we know that that's even more of a challenge in smaller communities or regions that may not have a huge hub employer, may not have some of the normal ingredients of the recipe. And so now we'll shift and look at a little different approach, right? Where maybe multiple partners come together for a single coordinated structure. So lead us off, TOOTRiS. Let's talk about the TriShare and that aggregated model.
Yes, and that'll be me. Thank you again, Jeff, for the conversation. There are in the United States right now several TriShare programs happening. There are approximately 12 from our best gathering for these. They're intentionally a publicly funded entity. It can be a county, it can be a state. Various entities, but usually you see a public entity coming together with employers and then the parent. So that's the tri. You usually see the three in the tri. So one of the examples that TOOTRiS is involved with Dallas County. So Dallas County has chosen to fund $1,500 per year for childcare opportunities for their employers in their county. And then that is opportunity for a employer to match the $1,500, and then the employee then matches the remaining. Now, of course, those who know the expense of childcare well know that $1,500 or even $3,000 doesn't cover childcare expenses for an entire year. But again, this is a great example of the public and private sectors coming together and doing what they can, just moving that needle a little bit forward to ensure that childcare can become more and more affordable. There are other examples. Michigan is usually cited as one of the first and one of the ones that is continuing to grow. They have continued to fund it, additional funds as a state. The some of the limits in that particular TriShare program include various medium incomes, federal poverty level guidelines, and so forth. So each of them has various guidelines. Each of them, the concept is making childcare affordable and doing that through a public entity, an employer entity, and then the remaining responsibility being on the shoulders of the family or the parents. And so we're seeing some movement in that space. We're seeing some successes, and yeah, Jeff, I think just a good example of another opportunity of ways to make childcare more affordable in the United States.
Yeah, and you highlight something I think it's really important to call out as I pull up the information that I think is sometimes overlooked in these examples is that you're also creating the framework to fully realize the real cost of this quality childcare, right? We sometimes are in communities where the full burden is resting on the parents and the family. And not because there isn't a desire of those other community organizations, work for whatever they might be, but there is no infrastructure. There's not even understanding of how could I play my role without maybe just writing a check and seeing it into the abyss, right? So I think this also creates that framework, that visibility that helps, as you mentioned, highlight all of those pieces. And so we've seen a large employer example. We've seen the shared funding model, right? Helping us put together the puzzle, the framework that accounts for the real cost, that enables those teachers, those other folks working in the centers, providing this care to have a livable wage, for the center to have a path to sustainability. Let's talk a little bit about the third example, and I'm going to spin the wheel and guess that Jacob is going to be our presenter on this. But when we think about this particular project and we think about what it means for this community, what we're really highlighting is a shift, right? From a place where there was no childcare, right? There's a story we've heard before, to a place that actually had some outcomes, leveraging some different approaches and some different mechanisms. Let's talk a little bit about this third example that really brings it home, especially to many of our communities represented across the country, certainly in this call, in this audience, and ongoing. Jacob?
Yeah, Jeff, you nailed it. Even all there are solutions for large enterprises and at the government level. A lot of us still come back to our hometowns and struggle with the question of how does a rural community go ahead and answer the issue of affordable childcare for our families, our neighbors, and our workers within the community. We saw this with one of our most recent partnerships with Smurfit Westrock. They're a paper manufacturer in Utah, Alabama. Utah itself has a population of less than 5,000 people of it, and they were struggling with a lack of childcare that directly impacted their ability to attract and retain their workforce. The community overall had a very limited number of licensed childcare providers. I think there was less than 3 when we began speaking with them. And again, that scarcity affects the company's ability to get people in their jobs Monday through Friday. With all that, they knew they wanted a kind of innovative and community-focused solution. And so that's when they started chatting with TOOTRiS. We partnered with Smurfit Westrock to go ahead and build them out a childcare ecosystem. And this went above just providing a benefit. It acted to build a childcare infrastructure within their small community. Before the program launched, there was no sort of network. If mom and dad needed help finding care, they were stuck with Facebook groups, personal referrals, maybe going to the HR office and saying, I just don't have care solutions. After the TOOTRiS partnership, the Smurfit Westrock employees were gifted access to a platform that allows them to go in real time and find care solutions. This can be early morning for early start shifts. It can be late night care solutions, weekend care solutions, holiday care solutions, any kind of care solution that mom and dad would need. Before the partnership, that community was close to zero. After the launch, we have about 15 to 18 different childcare providers in their network, and one streamlined location where mom and dad can use TOOTRiS to go in and find the care they need.
So I think what we're hearing Jacob talk about is the fact that at the end of the day, whether you're a large entity that's looking at this broadly, maybe in one location or multiple locations, all the way down to the towns that we call home that may not ever support that infrastructure or that big of an outcome, there are opportunities. And as we wrap up this and start to move into some actionable strategies and ideas that people can consider, I think it's also important to take a moment and highlight a firm belief that business of childcare is more and more we have an opportunity to localize our strategy. I'll be in Springfield, Illinois later this week speaking to the Midwest CDI conference on my keynote address for success, and this whole idea that we got to have a place and knowledge of where we're going, but also about don't try to assume you're going to hit all 50 states in one summer. Right, unless you've got a couple of good weeks. I've got a route for you if you're interested. It's too hard to do that, right? If we think of the same analogy, I'm only going to go see Yellowstone. I'm only going to go see whatever your national park may be. We realize we don't go to do them all. And it's the same idea when we think about this, is that too many communities are stuck at the start line because they're trying to fix and ideate and illustrate the full solve, the full problem. We'll never have to come back to it. And just like any of us in the audience in our day-to-day travels, we know there is not generally one problem big and important enough that we solve it once and never come back to. And so as you get started, I think that's a big part of it. No matter if you're ready to activate a solution right now, and we'll have an opportunity to be a part of some things coming up, it's also about grounding yourself on where are we, right? Back to the stages of readiness. Where is a community? Where is a organization or a workforce employer? Where are we? And where is it that we need to be? And so it's a good segue as we think about those first steps for organization, those first steps for action. When we think about what is it that we can do, not today, maybe. Some of you are wrapping up, hopefully the end of your day, but in the coming weeks, as we get into the beginning of the proverbial school year and everything else that comes with it, we start coming back to our offices on a regular basis. And we've got some ideas and some things for you to consider, and I'll have some questions for our panelists to further think about this. But the first steps towards activation is really actually the easiest. And I'll tell you, this is a cornerstone of our 3 pillars that really support forward motion, is start by engaging your existing providers. Right, when we talk about the very challenges we're highlighting today, we talk to providers all the time that have disengaged from the local systems of subsidy and otherwise. Why? Because the payments never run time, or it's delayed, or it's this. We have employers in communities, like one region right now, the big greater commerce organization's got a bunch of employers, but where do I write the check to? And sometimes our existing providers don't have the structure, the support, or I say often the confidence to go and engage those workforce leaders on their own. They're too busy keeping the staff at the center, keeping our kids engaged as they are. So it's a good way, if you haven't done any kind of activities in recent past in your community, even start with a basic appreciation event. A great way to get people in, say thanks, and at the same time elicit feedback on what are the challenges that are challenging their ability to continue doing this and serving this critical need. I think as our panelists have highlighted today as well, the other big component is figure out who your host is going to be. You need somewhere who centralizes, and I say who, they, it, however you want to look at it. There's got to be a place to write the check to. There's got to be a place to enter into an agreement for services such as those as TOOTRiS offers. There's got to be an infrastructure that even lifts those messages on the overall broad initiatives, right? We heard about that community engagement as part of it just as much as it is maybe the organization. And so serves 2 key roles, right? Fiscal, but also operationally can be a home for also that increased visibility, the messaging, and some of those supports as well. as we think beyond that, then, right, we have to think about, now I've got some groundwork of understanding. I've tucked in and brought in our existing providers to whatever realm of conversation you're having. Maybe it's just on this area, maybe it's on a broader set of initiatives. You've now got a framework organization willing to be the host and willing to help support those pieces. Now you're in a place where you're going to action. And we think about this supporting infrastructure, and I've got a few questions for you guys here in just a second. We think about it two ways, right? How do we coordinate all those funding contributions and participation in one initiative? Right? How can we make sure that everybody's got their place, and yet it's the same place that providers can engage, that families can engage, and then at the end of the day, we can have really good understanding of what's happening as time moves on. And then that already builds in all the tools, right? The classic that I've had, and we've actually created solutions for this. Thankfully, I don't have to do this anymore, is how do you create even visibility for providers? Right? That isn't the back office closed group sessions on Facebook. That creates that and lifts that professionalism that we all know these early ed professionals bring to the table. Well, we give them the tools and we plug it in so that we don't, as a community, have to figure out how to build a website that could do all those things. Right? And I think that's a big piece of what I hope you take away, is that there is a framework for scale. And we've got well-meaning individuals and groups and orgs that are all trying to do different things. At the end of the day, there is a standard. There is a system out there already that can help you do this. So whether you engage that system or whether you don't, I think it is a critical piece, just like any business. Just like we give advice to our family in-home providers and our centers, what's your system? Right? Even in our own lives, we have a system of how we budget, how we take care of those things. A question, anybody feel free to answer on this. If you think that, or we talk about, and maybe even before that, we should talk about what are the payoffs. And my question is going to be which of these payoffs are the most important? So I'm ahead of myself. But when we think about having this system in place, right, we have some really big wins, right? And if we start thinking about that, we have sustainability support for providers. Cash flow is like any small business, big, newer or older, cash flow is a big piece of it. Stability for families. Gosh, if our families are stability, we've been talking workforce, we've been talking systems. Little Johnny or Susie, back to my example, have a consistent ongoing care setting. When we listen to the early ed professionals, a lot smarter than I, they'll tell you in and out staff, changing of providers, all of that actually impacts those earliest and most important years. We extend that, right? Now our families got a setting. Tony, I think you said it right. We've got peace of mind. Now we've got reduced absenteeism. Right? I talk to factory owners and leaders all the time, and they'll tell you the second shift, the big one, half the shift isn't being able to staff. Well, it's killing their outputs, their outcomes. And it's not just about profit, it's about the contributions, for those of you on the call, to the overhead, to the salaries of the people that make our communities rich as they are, and something we're all on tune for, right? I think without doubt, how do we continue to most efficiently use the limited public resources, private resources, frankly, all the resources that make the math work? How do we make sure that we're leveraging a system in a way in which those things happen? I'm curious from the group of the ROIs that we're talking about, maybe that some I didn't mention. What do you think is the most important opportunity that moves stakeholders the fastest? Anybody on our panel want to throw a thought out on that? Like if we were going to take one to get the most people on board, what's the ROI that we're highlighting, do you think?
Yeah, and Jeff, thank you again. And your question's two-phased, and I appreciate it. The four that you mentioned, and then sort of the frame around what's the factor to move those in this space the fastest. And I think I always go back to, I think, and Tony speaks well to this as well as Jacob on the Smurfit situation, the employer, the CFO, the CEO, there's that side of things. I always, and I think all of us have been um, parents or have been children in the parenting puzzle. I always go back to what's already moving the parent. And I think most of the time the parent wants this resolved because it's hard. I mean, it's just frankly really hard. I've been a single dad when my wife passed away of cancer several years ago, and it's hard. I mean, I had a demanding job, and I all of a sudden needed to tap into something that I had never tapped into before, and it was really hard. And then related to that, and I'll leave it at this, I'm reminded of, and Tony, I think you alluded to it. It's about who we are and I'll just describe our relationship here together as a nation. It's about who we are as a nation. And I think Mazda Toyota Manufacturing said it well in a recent national celebration of Benefits Day, and that is it's about the future workforce. It's about creating the cyclical talent development because we know that from 0 to 5, that's the greatest time of impact for any human that is born into this world, and having the best possible quality care available is I think at its root, at least the parents' biggest motivation to make sure this problem is resolved.
Tony or
Yeah,
Jacob, do you want to add to that?
I'll just add that, every input point matters substantially because we have to come at this from so many different angles. But wherever there's, for instance, some type of financial support, whether it's a tax credit or whether it is a subsidy or a stipend from a business, that influence is huge. My 30-year-old daughter cost $100 a week when she was in childcare, and it was good quality childcare when she was a baby. And she argued with me, and it wasn't that long ago, about the cost of her child, my grandson. And I said, yeah, but we made less money, and time value of money even, it's kind of washes out. But I did the math. That $400 a month now is $800 a month. She pays $1,800 a month. And it's so substantial that some level of support, whether it's a $250 a month subsidy, that $3,000 a year, it's skin in the game. Everything matters. And then maybe there's some tax credits and maybe there's ways to chip around that. So you have that type of relief for that happy team member, we used to call them. We want the happy team member. Then on the provider side, you have all these in-home providers that are just invisible, and they have 2 or 3 openings and they only watch 12 kids. And that revenue is a real problem when they don't have that coming in. Well, what we love is TOOTRiS helps expose that, and they prioritize those with slots available first. So we take care of that and uplift that. So all those kind of things. And I think this is the non-competitive nature of the business community, by the way, where everybody can work on this issue together and still brag about being employer of choice and attract people. And now that we know, for instance, that an absence of an employee may be anywhere from $500 to $1,000. One absence may be that cost, or a replacement of a worker may be up to $40,000. You can really start to say, if I can improve that, what does that mean for the business? So it's almost more costly not to do something than to do it. That message alone, getting that across, changes the mindset, I think, of the business community to be more of a assistance in this complex game. So that's one of my big message from the corporate side. Employer side, they get uplifted at the same time. We still have to do the things, Jeff, that you're doing so very well, and I'm just so impressed by uplifting, especially in the rural communities and where there's the childcare deserts and things like that. How do we surface those problems and take care of them? So there's a lot of different angles, but there's so many opportunities right now, and we're making progress on it.
Well, I think both of you highlight some key takeaways that even as you're talking, Matthew, your experience as a single parent. We've talked to many of folks who've even moved to an area where there is no family. There is no grandma and grandpa. There is no anybody. We have folks who are working different kinds of shifts, different types of needs. And my message always, it's often agreed upon is that we do want opportunities for all of our residents, all of our families, all of our folks that make up our town, whether it's 50 or 50,000 or 500,000. We all, at the end of the day, have a neighborhood and community with any of those that we want to make sure that benefits and provides that opportunity for everybody. And I think the other piece is that you wrapped up with, Tony, is really also, I always say we've got to give people something to buy. Right? No one writes blank checks. My daughter just graduated from high school. We're still on the, hey, dad, I need 20. Can you Venmo me now? Though no one has cash evidently. But what I always say is my relatable, I think, example for those of us in that setting is if she says, hey, dad, I need 20 for Venmo, or she says, dad, I need 20 to buy a book for school, which one do you think gets the easy thumbs up, right? The one that has with it a need and an outcome that we will get with that money, even if the book may have nothing to do with the coursework upcoming. The last question I had follow-upping on this, before we start to get to a place of closing, I invite those that are on the live session today. We definitely will have a few minutes left for some Q&A if you've got some questions. If we run out of our time, we'll certainly do our best to follow up offline. The last question I had for anybody thinking about it, what do you think one specific action, and again, not to solve the problem, not to take, and put it to rest forever, well, what's one action a community could take in the next 30 days, even to strengthen their infrastructure? Does anybody have a top thought on that? What's our one thing? If somebody gets off today and before the end of September, they want to have something in action, what would you say it might be?
I think the biggest action's going to be start the conversation, right? Whether it's at your place of work, whether it's in your community chamber of commerce, wherever you be, whatever stakeholder that you represent, if you simply start the conversation, you get that attack a plan going. Our thoughts become our actions. And so by just initiating the question of how do we solve the childcare issue, that's a step in the right direction.
Get the team together, right? Get the whole community together. And I appreciate Tony's highlight. We have a lot of tools and ways at Business of Childcare. If you're just getting organized, just even want to get some initial conversations going. And frankly, there's a lot of other great resources in many of our communities that can provide that similar support and getting yourself organized. And as you begin to take action, you look at who are those entities like TOOTRiS, like Business of Childcare, and many others that can help us further realize, right, where our vision, where our address for success might be. As we get close to wrapping up, and again, welcome any questions from the live audience. I think that the big thing that I hope everybody takes away as we wrap up is there are some key things we have to come to agree upon, maybe set as a foundation. And I think the first is, as a community, we decide this is critical infrastructure. Just as critical as the road into town, we've got in the power lines that power us and the water that keeps us hydrated, we have to have childcare. And the role that communities can play, we've talked today about more of the infrastructure to help all the moving pieces, but we're seeing more and more communities. Mapleton, Minnesota, just about 2 months away from opening the first childcare house, a more smaller aligned outcome for the community their side. We're seeing communities hosting providers, both centers and family providers in space that's been appropriately set up. We're seeing a lot of different ways that we're doing it. Might be just the good old-fashioned dollars that help aid your employees on your 20-person staff to have an opportunity to engage the care that best aligns to their kids, their family, and their overall situation. So a big one there, I think, is the piece. I think then you got to Jacob's point, start thinking about what are those practical steps to get a momentum. Right? No perfect plan has ever been built before it got started. All of them ended up being the perfect plan because they adjusted, they updated, and they aligned themselves as they continued through. And then once you're able to do that, now we can start to think about those gaps. And how can we together with the whole community at the table play our own individual parts that maybe the others can't, but we're positioned to do that. And ultimately, shared benefits for everybody, right? Coming back to that idea of the whole community, everybody wins if we have good childcare. And so I think it's something that the basics are, and Jacob, you couldn't put it better. We didn't even script it, is start the conversation. And if you're already in the conversation, ask yourself, where are we not quite finding direction? Where are we not quite finding intention? And take a moment back, have another discussion. But set forth knowing that you don't necessarily have to solve all of it. The really big opportunity I want to highlight, and I'm excited because certainly I think for many on our session today, we're realizing even beyond the workforce, our employers and other leaders, there's an opportunity for communities to build infrastructure that not only mimics, but probably becomes even better for the benefits that the communities are looking for. Business of childcare and TOOTRiS are looking to work with a handful of communities that are interested in what that next step looks like. And the steps are pretty easy, I'll say, right? Express some interest. Let us know if you're interested in how might we start to build that supporting infrastructure. Big, small, everything in between. Don't limit yourself. Because at the end of the day, we're really helping get to places where it matters. We'll schedule this conversation. We'll talk through some options for beginning steps if you're really there. If you're at a place where, gosh, we know we're ready, then we start to think about those proven tools, those proven elements of guidance, those proven outputs that really get you to a place as a beginning stage to build that moment. And I think many communities are at that place where they have plans. They went through a several year planning process and became fatigued and maybe lost half of that original committee. If that's you and the barrier seems almost too big, this is a great place to start as well, because it'll give us a chance to help you even in a short burst. Kind of think about, how do you get that plan reignited? How do you get, maybe it's a new band together to take it to the next stage? We don't forsake anything that's happened in the past. We realize life is life. And especially many of these initiatives led by volunteers, business leaders, community leaders, education leaders, and others, we know that our own scope of focus and energy shifts from time to time. And so I think it's a great opportunity for communities that are maybe interested in taking those first steps. Before we close, I do want to leave it to our panel. And you guys have been great today. I really appreciate the storytelling. I encourage you to visit TOOTRIS's website, TOOTRIS, TOOTRIS.com. Like I said, we'll share those resources, but if you're not at the bit to get going, great resources, great storytelling, and really storytelling of outcomes. Outcomes that matter, right? Outcomes that are real, outcomes that have changed the trajectory of those businesses, those communities, and those others. Maybe Jacob, I'll start you off first. We'll go through a quick round here. What's your last piece of advice for anybody, anywhere, live or in a follow-up viewing of this? What's your best piece of advice overall for them besides starting the conversation?
Besides starting the conversation, I think I'm gonna stick with that one.
You see,
Your
you're
voice,
doubling up
no
on it.
matter how big, how small, again, you can make good ideas come to fruition within your community. You have agency. You do need to let your voice be known, though. So if you can start conversations about how you and the organizations that you're with can help with the childcare crisis.
Tony, how about you? From your lens, from your journey, what's your best piece of parting advice?
Well, you used the term. It's a journey, not a destination. I don't know that we ever want to say we got there, because there's always going to be something to do. But the key is to get on the road and get moving and be intentional about it. It's even more than the conversation. It's about actually putting milestones together and start working as a community towards something, because everything matters.
That's great. Matthew, I'm going to give you the last thought before we get ready to wrap it up today.
Yeah, I think I'll I'll stick with the conversations. I think it's once you get bitten by the bug, as it were, you you can't you can't not think about it. And I think I live in a very large part of the United States, in a very urban suburban place. And one of the things that when I started working in childcare several years ago, and maybe the word is I started noticing. I started seeing childcare facilities. I started seeing parents on the subway. And then once I started noticing, I started asking. And so I would ask politely and sometimes hopefully not nosily the stories. And just to maybe close my thoughts from a recent story, we live in a condo area, and I saw a young man literally reaching into the patio area of a unit when I was going to a meeting, headed towards the metro. And I saw him out of the corner of my eye. He was picking up one of those baby carriers. And I walk by, and as I am encouraging everybody else to do, start noticing and then start asking the stories, I was like, this has I've got to find out what's going on. And by that time he was headed into the car, and I said, I hate to be nosy neighbor, but I work in childcare and I see you just, picked up your child from probably a childcare opportunity. He started crying. He said, "Yep, my wife's my wife's working third shift and I'm looking for a job, and this is my wife's mother's condo, and I was picking up my child from her because I have the child now for the day, and while my wife gets some rest." He said, "When I do find a job, I don't have a clue what I'm going to do." And so I think once you start hearing those stories in real time, you you will become passionate, and you will create those milestones that Tony talked about and mentioned, and you'll see the action, because you can't not do the action once you start hearing those stories.
And I think it's right? And all of this comes down to, as we know with any messaging now, best messaging is one that has a story, a real story. And those stories exist even in our smallest communities. Great message today, a great opportunity again for our audience broadly. Don't forget that infrastructure that supports all the great initiatives that you're launching, wanting to launch, or will someday launch. As we wrap up, like I mentioned before, I'd highlight and encourage you to visit. We have a YouTube page that has, not only will have this session, but our previous sessions from before. In addition, some other resources. I also highlight for folks, visit our website, visit our LinkedIn page. A lot of storytelling, a lot of outcomes, a lot of ideas for you to take away and to have available. LinkedIn is where we have a lot of our opportunities and things that are available and highlighted there. More than anything, keep doing the great work that you're doing. My expectation is if you tuned in today, you're somehow working to make the outcomes for childcare better. And from whatever lens it is, don't worry about that lack of confidence, right? At the end of the day, we all come to the table with not full confidence on everything. And I think that's important because it also sets our stage to realize whatever we're going to do, it won't be perfect. It won't be the one and done, and that's okay because the motion, the visibility, the action itself is that beginning momentum that will set the stage for many things ahead. Thanks again, Tony, Jacob, Matthew, the whole TOOTRiS team. We're grateful for the ongoing opportunity to share and highlight the work that you're doing, because it really helps connect the dots for communities. For our audience, we appreciate you joining us. Our next summer series, August 19th, Chad Chancellor, Next Move Group, really talking about this intersection of economic development, childcare, what site selectors are talking about, how it's impacting the outcomes for communities around the country. I hope you'll join us there. And as always, thanks for joining us, and we hope you take away something good for you. Have a great day.
Thank you.